There are 5 conversations every couple should have before they decide to retire. Because retirement is not just a financial transaction, it's a lifestyle change that really affects every area of your life, especially for couples. So today, we're diving into the 5 financial conversations that every couple needs to have before retiring to make sure that you're both on the same page, set up for success. Let's dive in.
This is the Money Master Podcast.
Welcome back to the Money Master Podcast. Connie here with Nick and Tori. Welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, we are in Frisco, Texas, in the heart of the DFW Metroplex. So maybe you know somebody here, maybe you live here, maybe you'll want to retire here. Probably not.
No,
Not unless
maybe
you have kids here.
Yeah, maybe you want to be closer to family.
But today we're going to talk about 5 questions that you and your spouse need to have with each other before you decide to retire.
Yeah, this is an important topic because we're surprised actually at more and more, and I hate to start being negative, but you read about silver divorce over 50. We're surprised. I mean, we're surprised that we see it more often than we think. It is becoming an issue, and maybe it's because there's been kind of a mismatch in what people are thinking about
how their retirement will look and
Yeah.
their values in retirement.
I mean, my grandfather got up every day at 4 o'clock in the morning as a bricklayer, and my grandma made him breakfast, made him his lunch. He went to work. She stayed home. She was a banker for a few years. And then years later, when he retired, it was like a collision course of we're both home all the time. Like,
Yeah.
how do we navigate this? Are we on the same page? He wanted to travel all the time. She didn't. And that became a source of contention, and he had a great retirement, but, I think preparing mentally can make things better. Anything that we can possibly do.
Yeah.
And, especially communicating so we can avoid conflicts.
Yeah, absolutely. So conversation number 1, what does retirement look like to each of us? I've actually heard you guys talk about before where you've asked that question to a couple, whether you're meeting with them over Zoom or in person, and one spouse starts talking and the other one looks at like, what? I didn't know that. Right? So
That happens
this is
a lot.
a great place to start, right? So asking each other, what does retirement look like for you?
Yeah, it's almost like, I've never heard you mention that. Like they're like, what? But that's been something that person's been dreaming about doing as they, are at work every day. And that's something I wanted in the future. And they just haven't talked about it. They just
Right.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me what it looks like. Where do we align and where do we differ? Right.
Mhm.
Having a conversation. We see it a lot where, like you said, usually it's her looking at him like, what? I had no clue. And it's very surprising that they hadn't talked about it up until this point.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's a good starting point to get some of these conversations going? Like, it's one thing to just look at your spouse and say, hey, what does retirement look like to you? But do you have any conversation starters to like get it rolling?
Well, we've talked about our journal prompts before on the podcast, and we know the really looking towards the future and what are you going to regret? What are you going to wish you had done? Those types of conversations, because those do start to stir up those really core value things in you of what's really going to matter at the end of the day that we did together.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's something you're going to do, and that's going to be part of our plan is that you get to do that.
Mhm.
I've even had a couple talk about them wanting to vacation, but he's the penny pincher she's the penny pincher and he's not. He wants to buy nice first class seats. She goes, I'd rather be back in economy so we can save money, but still go on that trip.
Yeah.
And you just decide what's going to be important there.
A little give and take. Yeah.
I think you should, we tell people, ask open-ended questions like, what excites you about retirement? What does your perfect day look like?
Yeah.
What does your perfect weekend look like? Right? What does the perfect holiday look like? And just try to describe it and then start from there. And again, see where you guys align and see where maybe there's some differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Those are good, all good questions to use to start the conversation. Do you have any recommendations? This almost sounds like a therapy session, right? But like couples are starting to have these and they're realizing, Huh. Okay. We
People
don't really.
have told me that before. They're like, I didn't know you were a part-time therapist too. Because there's those marital conversations of like, well, thanks for helping us figure this out. Gotta get on the same page.
So, what would you suggest to a couple who, once they start having these conversations, realize, oh, hey, we're not really on the same page? Like, what would you recommend to help them get aligned?
First is the honesty. I mean, it's that
Open conversation.
you
That's
want
the
to
big
be
one.
honest, because if you're not, you're going to get 5 more years in retirement and still not know what the other person wants.
Right.
Yeah.
And be unhappy ultimately.
Right.
And so it's the honesty about, I do want this, you don't. How can we find that middle ground or common ground, or just, like I said, something I just do. And you have your own hobbies. It's there's space for me time. There's space for separate interests in retirement. It doesn't all have to be done together.
Right.
Me time is important. Like, meaning where your vision does not align, that's where you're pursuing your own thing. Some people, think of a guy specifically, he golfs 4 times a week, and that's he gets plenty of time, but you got to have that specific time. You have to talk openly about it. We've seen situations where one spouse is trying to like hold on to the reins of the other spouse because they're not sure what that spouse is doing next with the spending. It's like, well, you want to do this now? You want to do that? That was significant to you as well. And, so it really does help when you're on the same page.
Yeah.
And when you understand when you're not, and you guys can learn to compromise and just talk things out.
Yeah. That's really good. I'm just imagining somebody listening to this podcast and going home and be like, honey, let's go have dinner tonight.
You don't know what you're in for. I listen to a podcast.
But conversation number 2, how much can we spend without running out of money? And Nick, you touched on that. Like, one spouse might really want to overspend, and you mentioned it as well. And the other spouse is like, wait. I wasn't thinking that. Or like, oh, you wanted to do that too?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the first questions we ask people is their, financial peace of mind. And typically there is one spouse that's a little bit more at peace and they feel like they're on track, and one spouse who's really worried.
Yep.
And typically they play into the underspender and the overspender, or, the budgeter and the, those personalities are indicative of that number that they put on that page. But it comes down to, they come to us saying, I don't know what I can spend, but here's what I want to spend. And is this actually even going to work?
Right. It's surprising how many people actually, as a couple, one of them is like, I'm good, everything's gonna be fine. The other one's like, I don't think we're good. I want to know that we're good. And that brings you back down to like, what is your withdrawal strategy? Like, how do you know you're going to be okay? Like, you have to know you're going to be okay, which means you have to talk about how you're going to withdraw your money, right? Whether you're using the 4% rule, whether you're using a guardrail strategy, whether you're using a bucket strategy, you just have to know like clarity in what those rules are. And that can make you feel a whole lot better.
Say often that's the spouse that at the end of us building a plan together, they go, okay,
now
I
feel like,
see it.
Yeah.
They just needed to see it and feel it and experience that.
So that's probably the biggest way that couples can come together and really feel like, okay, here's a reasonable amount of spending.
Right.
Yeah. Working with a financial planner very closely. That makes sense. And what advice would you have for those big ticket items that couples want to do, like travel or buying a home or a remodel, or one of their toys that you call them, Nick? Like, any advice for the couples talking about those big ticket items?
Plan ahead if you can. So part of financial planning is the sooner you plan ahead, the better, because you can be, you could be 5 years from retirement and be planning for some of those big expenses and put yourself on a plan to have those things in 5 years. And that just takes pressure off of your 401k or other stuff, at the point of retirement. If you think, oh, I've got so much money and I'm going to have this much income, but then you're also thinking about the other stuff you want to do, when you actually sit down at the planning table and you got to cut that stuff out, which is the next thing you can do, which is cut out some of those things that and set them aside. Some of those big ticket items, put those in cash. You want to have, if you're going to have a big ticket item that's outside of your spending strategy, and it's going to happen, like, let's just say 2 to 3 years into retirement, maybe even a little bit further, let's set that aside and put it in CDs or cash. We don't want to trust, that we're not going to have a major bear market during a time that you plan on also paying off an RV or remodeling a kitchen.
Yeah.
Smart.
And I keep going. I think I've probably said honesty a couple times in this podcast, but that's another thing. It's as a financial planner, it's a red flag to me when someone comes in and they're, working, spending quite a bit of money a month, and then they tell me in the plan, oh, I can live on 75% of that in retirement. I'm kind of like, I don't know if you're, but then they come in and they're the people who are buying the stuff without being in the plan and that type of thing.
Yep.
And I'm like, you weren't honest about what you were actually going to be spending. And it's over time going to crash your plan. Let's plan for it ahead of time.
Right. That's what's nice about the guardrails strategy as a withdrawal plan is that you can see the cause and effect. So it's like, okay, I can spend X amount of money per month of the steady monthly income. But then if I come back and I pull 50 grand out to go do this thing that we didn't talk about, well, that means you spend this much less for the next
Per month.
for the next,
You see it.
in beyond. And it's like, okay, cause and effect. Those dollars are working for me to have that income. If I take those dollars and go buy a brand new backhoe so I could dig my pond on my property, there was somebody who did that, then, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
Oh, but I'm going to sell the backhoe after I build the pond. Okay. But wish we could have planned for that earlier,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Conversation number 3. What's our Social Security strategy? Social Security plays a big role in your financial plan, and it's important to work with a professional to know how to optimize that Social Security and coordinate it along with your other retirement savings, right? So great conversation to have. What do you guys think about that?
I think this is somewhere, one, people do come to us a lot to optimize that. It's something that's a little bit hard to figure out just by guessing.
Yeah.
But some people do come to us with I know when I'm claiming. I want to claim this year and that's what I'm going to do. And so I think you've got but if you're not having that conversation and being clear about that, then it's confusing. And so I think you have both types of people.
Yeah. The big thing, as you're having that conversation, the reason that it's important and it shouldn't just be put by the wayside is that spousal benefit. You want to explore what that survivor and spousal benefit is. So generally speaking, the longer you wait, the bigger your benefit gets, but so does your spousal and survivor benefit. And when you look at your retirement like a 25 or 30 year bucket of time, rather than I know my bills are paid this month and this year, what you'll see is that Social Security goes down when one person passes away. And it goes down less if you have a bigger benefit, if you have a bigger survivor benefit. So how is that going to affect your retirement portfolio, right? That's why it's helpful to look at it in light of everything all together and your financial story written down in one place. So you can see kind of the cause and effect and you can explore what that looks like. And, it always comes back to running scenarios with financial planning software. We're big fans of doing that as opposed to doing the anecdotal, yeah, but I get more. Yeah, but I break even at 79.
Well, I'm going to say the other thing at play is inflation. I mean, the smaller the benefit, the less it's going to provide for you inflation. Yes, you get cost of living adjustments.
Yeah.
But typically they don't necessarily cover what real inflation is. So your benefit size is going to matter.
If you're worried about inflation, if you're worried about inflation and where this country is going with inflation, then you should probably say, I want to prioritize having a bigger Social Security benefit.
I would venture to say that this is a topic that most couples don't think about to have the conversation about until they're right at that age. And then also my guess is that when they visit with a financial planner and realize, hey, we have options, maybe their initial idea of this is when we were going to turn on our Social Security, it might change after they have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, because some people think I want to go ahead and turn my benefit on because I don't want to start drawing from my retirement accounts too early. But when we show them what that actual withdrawal amount is and how it doesn't really throw off their plan, then it's actually better to grow the benefit. They just need to see it and test it and see it play out in their plan.
Yep.
I think it's just, people don't realize that you can coordinate your Social Security benefit along with everything else and how important it is.
To be fair, not everybody should wait longer.
Right.
Not everybody should. There's reasons why you should claim early. We've talked about it in plenty of videos out there, but it's just not something it's a one-time decision that makes a huge impact on our retirement. It's a little hinge that moves a big door. And so since we can't undo it and such a big deal, why make the decision on a napkin?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey there, this is a quick break to talk about how you pay yourself in retirement. People often ask about how much they're going to be able to spend each month from their savings when they're no longer working. You may have heard of the 4% rule, the bucket strategy, or nameless others, but none of them do a good job measuring your true spending capacity. That is, how much can you afford to spend each month confidently? I wrote a white paper you might want to read. It's about a guardrail system for retirement that can help you do better in retirement. And I think it's probably the best withdrawal strategy available. There's no cost to download and read it. If you want a copy, all you have to do is text the word income to our business line at 214-988-9178. That's it, just the word income, and send it to 214-988-9178, and we'll send that paper about guardrails straight to you.
All right, conversation number 4. How will we handle unexpected cost? This is a great one to also talk about because, while you're working, you just kind of deal with it as it comes, right? And sure, maybe you have some money set aside in a savings account and it covers it, or maybe you don't, right? So this is a good one to talk about because retirement will bring surprises, right?
Yep.
Or healthcare emergencies, or your AC breaks in the middle of hot summer. That there will be emergencies. So, Nig, Tori, how can couples talk about that?
Prepare for it. Would you say
Yeah,
that?
you already basically said what you have to prepare for. I think the biggest one that people don't realize and they underestimate are the out-of-pocket cost of healthcare. And then things like HVAC.
Mhm. I've heard
Little,
that one many a times of we're
yeah,
feeling a little tight this year, based on what we've prepared for withdrawal strategies because we
yeah.
had to replace our HVAC and it's like, okay, well,
There's a
those.
lot of those little things,
Mhm.
right? There's a lot of those little things. So especially when you get Medicare Advantage and you're like, well, look at how cheap my stuff is. But then you don't realize that you also have more out-of-pocket costs when you're out of network. If you have an emergency, certain things that you need done, procedures you need done may not be covered. You didn't match it up to your doctor properly. Those out-of-pocket costs can add up, and they tend to happen on and off. And so you want to have something there so you can, prepare for that, for when those come up. Right? You want to have a strategy.
So, like you say, prepare, right? But how can couples balance between
Over.
over saving, right, and limiting what they're saving? Like, where's that
Well,
balance?
I mean, one of the things is guardrails. Stuff happens, right? So if you do have that emergency, we're just going to see how it impacts the guardrails. Stuff happens that you cannot avoid, and you can't prepare for
Take
everything.
more out, you're saying.
Yeah, because
Because
you
you have
have to.
room to, because of the guardrails
Right.
allow that space.
And I no, we don't want to build any plan with just so much extra what ifs that you aren't spending any money because you're worried about those things, right? Like
Yeah.
that's over preparing.
Right.
But we will sprinkle some in when people are worried of let's put a little extra in there
Yeah.
of just to give you some peace of mind.
Practically speaking, 6 to 12 months liquid, okay, in easy to access. And if you know of anything else that you need, like, for example, if there's a special medicine you need that's expensive, hard to get, add some cash to the, to the bank account for that, okay? So 6 to 12 months, and then anything that you know that you might have to do. And then we always, as Tori said, we put a buffer in the budget. So we don't want to just cut it close. We want to put a buffer in the budget. We had somebody retire last year and she has this buffer, and she knows that because her retirement was a little bit tight. And she knows that if she doesn't spend that buffer, she can do more stuff the next month, and she has a nice way of tracking it. But if she does use the buffer because it comes up, that she had to pay for more, on the toll roads that month or something because of something happened, then, she uses it up, right? And then if she uses that up, then the next plan is to go to the portfolio, okay? But she has that in place, right? That buffer, it's a little game she plays, and it's nice for her to be able to do that. And then every year when she, a question people ask is, well, how do you refill your emergency bucket? And we've said this on this before, and I'll say it again. Every year when you meet with your advisor, you should be looking for those tax planning opportunities. Maybe you can harvest some gains. Maybe you can harvest some losses, actually, possibly as well. And you can then use that money to refill that bucket so that you can continue to have that peace of mind.
That's good. All right, conversation number 5, last one for today. What's our legacy plan? Right. So planning your legacy, it's not just about money. It's making sure that your wishes are clear and that your loved ones are taken care of. So what should couples be talking about when it comes to legacy planning?
Well, first, what's important, the values of
Yep.
what matters to them at the end of life. I mean, and sometimes that's why a couple will come meet with us, because the husband may feel fine about the planning, but he wants to know his wife's taken care of, because, that's a value to him. He's doing some legacy planning in that moment of making sure she's set up.
Right.
And so having those, what are you worried about if one of us is to pass? What do you want to make sure happens? Those conversations.
Yeah, and with so many marriages that are, they're multi, have had more than one marriage, a lot of times you'll hear two different opinions from both spouses. And it's important to actually hear both. And usually they find an easy resolution. Usually they honor each other's wishes, but there's usually some, asset, like you take an inventory of your assets, by the way. Go and look, take an inventory and say, okay, this is what we have. This was from a previous marriage. I want this to go to
Or
this
children
person.
or whoever
And
specifically.
yeah, start to work that out and then ask the question, okay, legally, how is that going to go there? Right. And then it's just that simple. It's prioritize, start with what's important to us. And then how do we get it to happen? And let's just turn it into easy, actionable steps.
And then really, if you want to talk about how much money is left over, that's sometimes the point of contention of, I know I want to leave this much for my children. And sometimes the other spouse doesn't agree.
Yeah.
And so being very clear on that too, of what's important.
And some people can plan, like we'll actually plan for how much money they want to have left over. And then we can target their income distribution to and land close to that.
Right.
Some people want to spend it all the way down to zero. And, obviously we're not going to do that, but we're going to help them to spend more aggressively so it gets close to that without compromising their other goals like healthcare planning and things like that. A lot of people say, I just want to die and, die
What's
poor.
left is left.
My kids are going to get my house, and that's cool too. You want to honor that. Also, you've got charitable giving. You have charitable giving strategies. And I think talking about that is important. And that's one of the fun things that financial planners get to do is it's not just about surviving. It's about identifying money earlier so that you can do things with it while you're alive. Legacy planning doesn't just be about when you're gone.
Yeah.
It can be about giving that $19,000 a year in your gift ability every single year if you want to. It can be about helping
Down payment
a
on
down
a house.
payment on a house.
Yeah.
Indirectly funding a retirement Roth for your granddaughter because they have earned income, and then they can maybe fund it through their workplace, and then you reimburse them as part of your gift tax exemption. Qualified charitable distributions to your church. There's all kinds of things that we can do, but we want to kind of know what that is and be able to plan out, and then you can have a much more meaningful experience in retirement.
I say it is more, and it's helpful to be able to plan when you know what the goal is. I mean, I've built a plan for someone who had a very specific goal when the first spouse died, and we built that into the plan. And then when the second spouse dies, there's another one. Like they knew how they wanted that legacy money to be played out, and then we can implement. We can if the goal's not there, not clear.
Yeah. So you guys mentioned a lot of practical tips and steps to do for the legacy planning. Obviously, it wasn't mentioned, but inferred, having a will or a trust set in place. And some of the things that you guys mentioned, charitable giving or giving to your kids, like those are things that you definitely want to talk about, and not just, if you don't talk about them, they don't happen. Right. So, the legacy planning for people who are listening, this might be a second dinner topic, maybe not cover all
a little more
in one.
emotional. Yeah.
But we appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. We hope that you found this helpful, and we would love for you, if you're watching through YouTube, leave a comment or ask a question. We'd love to hear from you, and definitely click the subscribe button so other people just like you can find our channel, and share it with a friend. Until next time, have a good one.
Nick Davis is an investment advisor representative of Brindle and Bay Financial Advisors, a registered investment advisor. This show is for informational purposes only. Any references to client experiences made may be deemed to be indirect testimonials. Clients were not compensated for providing any testimonial statements. Any references to client experiences are for illustrative purposes only. Actual client experiences will vary. Any exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered financial advice or recommendation to buy or sell a financial vehicle. You should consult a qualified financial tax or legal professional before taking any action. This program is not endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. Brindle & Bay Wealth Management is affiliated with Brindle & Bay Financial Advisors.